Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Raw Law Unfiltered with your host, the DUI Guy Plus. Today, once again, by popular request, we have a very special guest on the show. She is backstage and she will join me in just a few seconds. Her name is Claire Best. She is a TV and film agent by profession, but she kind of dabbles in something very interesting. And she's been on our show quite a few times. I think this is at least number three, if not number four. And every time she comes on, she gives the inside scoop. She has done meticulous research on the topic of Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, the Me Too movement, the basically all of the politics and the dirt that is involved in all of the Me Too and Amber and all that stuff. So today, the hot topic of the day is Amber and maybe Me Too's, I'm not sure, connection to Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, that's a new one even for me. I mean, I almost was like, okay, somebody's trolling over here, but I can't wait to hear the connection. So without further ado, allow me to introduce Claire Best. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Larry. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me on again.
Of course, as always. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and hope you're well. And we've had a few months since we last spoke, and an awful lot has happened. And it's about exactly a year ago that the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial ended, and
Tomorrow, literally, tomorrow is the anniversary.
yeah, and a lot has happened since then, I think, to open people's eyes up to what's going on. And I look back at that trial and think, that Johnny Depp basically demanded that the trial was live streamed, and people started to really wake up and see that what we're reading, what we're seeing in the media is not necessarily the truth. And we need to kind of come back to being critical thinkers when we read and see articles with news, or and I like think about who's behind them, and what are the goals of the people behind them. And I personally have really had an issue with this, and I recently spoke to somebody actually who works in a PR company who literally admitted to me that they don't think of journalists in mainstream anymore as journalists. They think of them as influencers. And I was absolutely staggered. I was like, wow, I hadn't thought about that. And they admitted themselves that to really find out the news, you have to read across different platforms, watch different platforms. And, we need to get, and yes, there are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there, and people think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm really not. I throw questions out and go looking and see what I find. And I believe a lot of people watching this show do that as well. And when you see what's actually going on, say with the whole Jeffrey Epstein and all the meetings that are now coming out, and the people that he was meeting with in 2014, and across academics, across FBI, CIA, celebrities, Noam Chomsky, or you start to kind of think, wow, even in my wildest dreams, I could not come up with, a conspiracy as big as what that is. That it's like we see little bits and pieces here and there, but it's like the fabric. We see a few threads. We don't see the fabric. The fabric is shocking.
So weave it for us, please. I give you what do you call those little metal things that you weave? I don't know what they're called.
Knitting needles. The knitting needles.
Knit. Oh, come on, I could have guessed that. Knitting needles. Let me give you the knitting needles. Try saying that 10 times. And please weave this cloth for us. We're all chomping at the bit.
I will do. Okay, so let's start out with because Amber Heard was kind of a subject that we started all this off with. I just want to say that one of my main concerns right now is the issue of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and child trafficking. And, you know, if you go to an airport bathroom, you see signs up saying, you know, if you've been trafficked, you know, call this number, etc., etc. And people get arrested and stopped. But there are other kinds of ways of trafficking people, and one of them is coercing them, offering them money, offering them celebrity, offering them book deals, TV deals, etc. If they will be a front for whatever cause it is. And you could say these are models or actresses, and you could say they're being trafficked as well. And so, you know, when we look at Amber Heard, my feeling actually is that she was trafficked. Not necessarily. Yes, yes, that's a
Not in
word.
the strictest sense, but
Not
in a metaphorical sense,
not
or something
well.
more literal.
I'm not sure, because when she met Johnny Depp, she had, you know, from what I've read, she was you know, offered the role in Rum Diary. He had to interview her, he had to approve her, and she was one of the requirements, I believe, from the financier. And there are rumors, and I don't know if they're true or not, that she was an escort, you know, around that time or before. And, you know, when she went to meet him, supposedly she turned up at his trailer, you know, wearing a toweling gown and nothing underneath. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. And again, as I say, I'm putting the question out there for people to think about. I'm not saying this is what happened. And that's a very important thing about a lot of what I'm saying. You know, I will tell you when there's a fact. This is what's out there ruminating around.
Sure.
But anyway, she does Rum Diary with him, and she sort of rises to fame, you know, with Johnny Depp. He falls for her. They get married. They have their relationship. You know, it's a stormy relationship. It's a toxic relationship. And then, you know, they break up, and, you know, and then all of a sudden she starts getting all this publicity as a, you know, survivor of domestic abuse. And, you know, she goes with Michelle Dauber to the Glamour Awards. Then she is in Glamour magazine in 2018, wearing red in a red dress with her blonde hair and her red lipstick, promoting Me Too, but also promoting atheism, veganism, and bisexuality. And then she has the Washington Post op-ed, which the ACLU admit that they wrote for her. And in the discussion that comes up behind the positioning of the ad or the op-ed, etc., is the tie-in to the Aquaman release, and the renewal of the Violence Against Women Act, etc., etc. So what I feel is that Amber Heard was a tool. She's a very beautiful woman. She's an actress. She came from a.
Minds may differ on that topic, but please
Okay,
continue.
but she's you know, she's classically
I
what
understand what you're trying to
you know what
say.
I'm saying.
By
And
American standards, I
yes,
suppose. Before the
and
trial,
yeah,
before the accusations, before the
yeah,
divorce.
no, absolutely. And I mean, look,
But
you
anyway,
know,
please, I interrupted. So,
no, it's fine, it's
and they
fine. I mean,
utilize that beauty, I think you were trying to say.
yes, exactly. And that she was a model who could be used to sell things, whether it was a big idea, whether it was, you know, a piece of crypto technology or crypto exchange, which somebody pointed out to me that she did a photo shoot at Cantor Fitzgerald, which is, you know, a money exchange operation. And that, you know, shortly after that, I believe she shortly after that, Cantor Fitzgerald then got this deal, I think for Tether or one of the crypto exchanges. And so you look at this and you say, oh, so they had her into Cantor Fitzgerald. They did this sexy photo shoot with her, and then they sold whatever it was that they were selling. So it's that kind of thing. And it's like, I would like to know to what extent she was really aware of how she was being used. She had to earn a living. That's fine. She decided to go model, do all these things. That's fine too. But did she really know the underlying things that she was selling? So yes, yes, and I don't know. I don't.
I want to posit a theory. So, because the things that I feel know about her, her ability to gaslight, her narcissism, her epically creative thinking, the mental gymnastics, the verbal gymnastics, her ability to con people into doing her bidding, her ability to suck people into doing things they don't want to do, like all of that collectively, we have come to know and not love as Amber Heard. So, with that being kind of at the center, isn't that like the ideal person to come and do your bidding? Like, look, we're going to pay you heftily. You're going to be a star, kiddo. You're going to get this and that. You just need to do this, this, and this. And she's like, bro, where do I sign up? So, I think I would paint her less of a victim and more of a willing participant in a process. She just didn't know how deep goes, basically. That's
Yeah,
that's
and
my theory.
well, no, and I think I think your theory is right, and I think that somebody I know made a documentary about the porn industry and how they hire, and what they discovered was that the porn industry hires vulnerable women on campus, and they go up to them and they say, "Oh, we saw your Instagram pictures in the bikini or whatever it is that you're wearing. You look beautiful, and you could earn money from that. Come and we'll give you money." And they say that the person who looks down at their shoes, who's shy about it, is the person who gets hired, the person who's feeling insecure, and the person that turns around and tells them to F off is the person that doesn't get recruited. Well, I think there's somewhat of that mentality with the Amber Heards of the world, and it's not just her. There are other people who might have a messed up background, may have a background in substance abuse and mental health issues, etc., who are very easily recruited and very easily manipulated to turn into whatever is needed for them to go and seduce, extort, extract whatever information is needed. And in fact, there's a historical precedent for this, which is in the Second World War in Britain. There was I think his name was Leon Britton, actually. I can't remember, but there was this group of women who were recruited, brainwashed, dropped behind enemy lines, essentially as prostitutes, and to get information. They were spies, and there have been films about this. So it's not a new thing. And it's just, and then there was the whole MK Ultra experiments with the CIA, which, I really hadn't followed that much. And I had frankly kind of thought was exaggerated. But there's a legal case in Canada right now where families have members put into institutions at McGill University Hospital, I think it was. And, and they came out 3 weeks later, kind of like 3-year-olds, and about, just completely brainwashed. So to what extent is this still going on? I'm not sure, but I think there are elements of it still going on. And I think that there are elements of technology and AI that are doing experiments on people for mind control and to see how far they can, push things. And Jeffrey Epstein is one particular person who has, been fascinated in AI, transhumanism, which, some people call eugenics. And, and also, he has his backer was Leslie Wexner of Victoria's Secret. And, Jeffrey Epstein had all of these connections to CIA, to FBI, to Obama's legal team, to, heads of Harvard, heads of MIT, Bill Gates, and, and the Clintons, Trump, the list of who he was in contact with, and they all say now, oh, we regret meeting him, or we only met him casually, or we didn't know what was going on. I'm sorry, it's rubbish. If you're a CEO who runs a company, particularly a publicly held company, and you go to meet Jeffrey Epstein and you don't have your team do their due diligence about who it is you're meeting, what their background is, you don't deserve to be a CEO of that company. And Bill Gates, Bill Gates is a busy guy. He chose to go and meet Jeffrey Epstein all the time. Noam Chomsky, the same. The guy who was head of CIA, the same. I mean, every single one of them. Larry Summers, the same. All of them chose to prioritize Jeffrey Epstein. And a bunch of them really liked having young women on their arm, even if they were in their 70s, 80s, of women who are 40, 30, 29, 28, and it's like, and some of these people also purported to be behind, supporting women, getting behind gender equity, gender equality. And, I personally think that actually what they were doing was working out how to use women, how to monetize them. And I think it's very telling that in 2009, the World Economic Forum introduced the Gender Equity or Gender Equality Project, and Klaus Schwab's daughter, Nicole Schwab, who'd been to Harvard, she was in charge of it. And then they created all these agendas to promote women's equality and da 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 da. But who was promoting it? A bunch of old guys who liked having younger women on their arms. And so, and it's the same thing with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I go to these meetings. Just yesterday I had one where it was an organization that promotes diversity, equity, inclusion, and they had 3 white women, of which I was one black woman on the phone. And, it was almost like it was performative putting her there. And I was like, if you're going to hire someone who's diverse, then train them, give them a role, respect them. But I find all of this is very performative. And so, and in the end, who is behind it all but a bunch of, older guys, all tied into the World Economic Forum, all being fined, hundreds of millions. Deutsche Bank found 75 million.
Okay, so hold on. So let's reel it back in. I'm trying to get a grasp, and I think maybe we kind of already hit on that point. So the machinations was what I'm hearing you say. The machinations of Jeffrey Epstein. Thank you for that, beautifully damaged. She says it was a little late watching last live. Beautiful. Thank you. The machinations of Jeffrey Epstein are related to Amber Heard more than just in a tangential sense, like we started with. It is more direct, as she was just essentially one of, maybe not directly his, if you will, recruits, but within those same circles that they were running. And again, I just adamantly refuse to accept that she was just some innocent little bystander. Oh my God, wrong time, wrong place. I do not believe that. I think she is much too intelligent for that, as much as I don't like to give her credit. That's one thing that she does have. It's a different kind of intelligence. It's a conniving, conning, manipulative intelligence, which usually crumbles when it's being questioned. But when you're one-on-one with a person like that, you will not know that you're being conned. It's when you have 50 million people watching the same thing and we all kind of go, are you kidding me? But one-on-one, if she was telling the story, it may be very easily believed, or a different story, without knowing all the evidence, of course. So I feel like I'm rambling, but the point I'm trying to make here is Amber did not just act because she wanted to act. She was being guided like a puppet
Yes.
by somebody like, look, do what you need to do, say what you need to say. You have our support. And that links back to Jeffrey Bloody Epstein, by the way, who did not kill himself, for the
Yeah.
record,
No,
in case
exactly.
you didn't know.
Yeah. Well, let's wind back a little bit with Jeffrey Epstein. So
Please.
he was a con artist. He
Yes.
got hired by Bill Barr's father to teach at Dalton School in New York, even though he wasn't qualified. And and then he was promoted to Bill Clinton by Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, who was married to, or got married to, Evelyn de Rothschild, whose family, the Rothschilds family, was behind were the financial backers of Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell. And actually what happened is that Robert Maxwell was, suicided. Even his own daughter thinks that he was killed. And after he was suicided, the family were, the brothers were on trial in England for stealing over 400 million pounds in newspaper group pension funds from the Mirror newspaper group, which he owned. They got off. Ghislaine Maxwell was allegedly told by her brothers, "You're no longer welcome in the UK. You better go to New York." And she went to stay with Lynn Forrester, who then became Lynn Forrester Rothschild. And Lynn Forrester Rothschild promoted, and I'm not quite sure how she met Jeffrey Epstein. There are different stories, so I won't go there. Other people have covered it. There's a woman called Whitney Webb, who has a blog called Unlimited Hangout, which I highly recommend. She goes very deep into the whole background of the Epstein and Maxwell in those days. But suffice it to say, in 1995, Lynn Forrester Rothschild wrote a letter to Bill Clinton and recommending Jeffrey Epstein for quote unquote currency stabilization. Nobody's ever asked her what that means, but I think it's important to try to figure out what it does mean. Then Bill Clinton got busted with the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and Bill Clinton opened the Clinton Foundation, and Jeffrey Epstein credited himself for the opening of the Clinton Foundation. So there was a sex scandal, Clintons opened the Clinton Foundation. Next thing that happens, Hillary Clinton opens a spin-off foundation of the Clinton Foundation called Vital Voices, which is supposed to promote women's leadership, vital voices around the world. And then Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein go jetting around the world in the early 2000s, and they're going all over Africa and Hong Kong and Cyprus. Anyway, they're going to a bunch of different things, supposedly under social justice causes. And sure, I'm sure there was a big element of that, but I think it was sort of the beginning of this, philanthrocapitalism, effective altruism, whatever you want to call it. And it was like splashing money around to make money under the guise of social justice. And so in 2007, Jeffrey Epstein went to jail, had a very cushy jail sentence. And while he was in jail, Bill Clinton's financial advisor, who himself had been pardoned for financial fraud, went to visit Jeffrey Epstein, I think over 20 times, maybe over 30 times in jail in Florida. And nobody really knows why he was going to see him. And there have been assertions out there that Jeffrey Epstein was tied to the 2008 financial crash. I have no idea. But, Bill Gates later on went on to, say that Jeffrey Epstein was his financial guru or his financial advisor. And so obviously Jeffrey Epstein had some financial savvy that all these guys wanted. And they were all going to consult him. And, whether they were getting massages, trafficking, or mixed, or money laundering or whatever, I don't know. But what I do know is that Jeffrey Epstein seemed to be the mastermind of opening up these foundations and going to seek money from the Bill Gateses of the world, to put into these foundations. And then these foundations would give very generously to various social causes. But in fact, when you strip the foundations back, you find what appears to be a whole lot of smoke and mirrors and money laundering and self-dealing and all of that. And in his telephone book, he's got tons of numbers for all sorts of people. But one of the things that he has is this book, is this number to a guy whose name I forget, but his organization is called Terra Power. And you think, wait a minute, what is Terra Power? So I looked up Terra Power. Terra Power is basically, a technology platform, for new ideas, And Epstein and Maxwell had this thing called Terramar, which turned out to be a fake foundation. And on the board of Terramar was this guy, Amir Dasal, from UN Women, which Amber Heard was, an ambassador for.
Right.
And Amir Dasal has never really answered any serious questions about Terramar, but Terramar was giving out these passports to the high seas. And allegedly, when Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested, she said that she had citizenship to Terramar, and that the whole thing is really peculiar. So, but what Epstein liked, obviously, or loved, was these young women, underage women, and a bunch of these guys that he was dealing with seemed to as well, and and then he was able to blackmail them. So Bill Gates, met this young Russian bridge player, and then Epstein was suddenly paying for this young Russian bridge player's education, and then asking Bill Gates to pay for that education and trying to blackmail him that if he didn't put, I think it was $100 million into some foundation, he was going to expose Bill Gates's affair with this young Russian woman. And so he was trading money and sex, and building foundations with money and sex, and and organizations like Cantor Fitzgerald and so forth were. I'm not saying that they were complicit in this, but there's a knock-on effect that suddenly Amber Heard shows up. She's sexy. She's sitting on their on their computers or whatever, and the next thing they're doing is selling their services to be overseers for Tether or whatever other financial thing it is. So that's kind of where I'm going.
Wow.
Yeah.
As always, the ability to process the information is not as fast as the information coming at me. So there's like a delay and a lag for my brain to catch up to what you just said. That is a lot. I mean, some of the stuff about Jeffrey Epstein, obviously, I think we've all kind of either known or heard, and his connections, and just makes the skin crawl just thinking about it. But this whole, again, tying into our protagonist is just Amber Heard. By that, of course, I mean is just. This is the only response that I have. It doesn't surprise me. That's the bottom line.
I think that, look, I mean, I never paid much attention to the World Economic Forum before, but I started looking at the news organizations that got behind her And after the trial was over, it was very clear that, the jury made their decision. It was a live trial. I don't think that there was any surprise really from people really paying attention to it of what the jury decision was. And yet, despite that, on NBC, in these, magazines and so forth, they were still saying, oh, but Amber Heard's a survivor and now other women won't be able to speak up and they're still pushing this and da, 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 da. And you're thinking, so I started looking up these organizations and finding a pattern and finding that NBC is a World Economic Forum partner, BBC is a World Economic Forum partner, Condé Nast, which is Glamour magazine and Vanity Fair and all, is a World Economic Forum partner. Amazon, which is Washington Post, is a World Economic Forum partner. Time magazine is a World Economic Forum partner. But who isn't a World Economic Forum partner is Newsweek. So
I didn't know
that I can find. And so it's very interesting because
why is that significant?
Well, it's significant because Newsweek is the one magazine that I've come across that seems to challenge the Me Too narrative. And I first noticed this in
Really?
Yes. Yeah. And I first noticed this in December 2015, because after the New Hampshire versus Owen Labrie trial, when, New York Times, Boston Globe, Washington Post were talking about, rape culture on display, blah, 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 blah. Newsweek published this article saying, how, antiquated 90s, computer law kind of led to, this trial and the sex offender registry for Owen Labrie. And there was a change.org petition started by some of the nonprofits tied to Me Too to get the Newsweek article taken down. And I looked at who was behind the taking down, and it was this organization called Serve Justice. And who is Serve Justice? Well, it's this woman called Laura Dunn, but also this person called Wagatwe Wanjuki, who is a social media influencer who was basically essentially hired by the White House in, during the Obama years in 2014 and so forth, specifically to get hashtags to bring awareness to college campus, sexual assault, the precursor to Me Too. And so they were artificially manipulating right then and there. And they had target audiences that they were going towards. So when the Newsweek article did come out, and it was very reasonable, and it was throwing questions out there that everybody should really want to know for their own kids about, computer felonies and how they apply to your children's, particularly in the, texting, digital, internet, Facebook age. And none of these organizations wanted them out there talking about it. It was like, don't, shut it down. It's one-sided, da, da, da. And you're thinking, it's not one-sided. It's throwing out a real serious question. And so they were pushing this narrative. And so that's when I discovered that's when I started paying attention to who is behind the news organizations of what we're reading. And so nowadays what I do is, I everything I read, I think about who's this influencing for. And I have noticed very recently that the Associated Press, who also had allowed themselves to be manipulated, that the Associated Press in very recent weeks is suddenly trying to put below their thing that, they're dedicated to trying to find out the truth and things. That's pretty new. And I've also noticed on articles that now you see these headers saying, by reading this article, you might be contributing to, our advertisers things. That's new. That's new in the last few months. So for the last, 7, 8, 9 years, 10 years, we have been unknowingly manipulated by influencers posing as journalists, working for these lobbyists.
Right.
and using people like Amber Heard in Glamour magazine or in the Washington Post to push these narratives, even though they know that they're completely false, because they're
Right.
trying to get government contracts, they're trying to increase the revenue for Aquaman, they're trying to increase the traffic for Time's Up and Time's Up branding. Time's Up has all these, or did, have all these brand tie-ins all over the world. It was a money-making venture. And Jeffrey Epstein said publicly that he supported Time's Up. And I noticed that all these organizations that are World Economic Forum tied magazines and newspapers were all very careful to promote this article about how Jeffrey Epstein supported Time's Up. But in the same token, they weren't questioning, well, that's a bit weird. Why does he support Time's Up? And what about his sex trafficking? How does that work? Not a single journalist questioned that. It's like, what is wrong with you guys?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the death of journalism. That's why independent journalism is in such a high rise right now, and has been for the past year and a half at the very least. The Johnny Depp trial has definitely kind of opened up a lot more vistas to that. I've noticed it was a huge spike. And I think people, I mean, look, people are just hungry for the truth. People want, why did, was it like 10, 15 years ago? Why did quote unquote reality television, why did it catch fire? Because people wanted to see something real. They were tired of the same scripted, rehearsed, hello everybody. Oh, did I do that again? Like, okay, yeah, we've heard that line so many times. Steve Urkel, thanks. Or his was like, did I do that? I think that was his line. We all got tired in the 90s of seeing that. And with the advent of reality TV, whose line is it anyway? The UK version, the US version, they're all just feeding this hunger in the public of wanting to see something authentic, something real, something that the media and television, movies, shows were not providing. And so journalism was also, in the beginning, in the very, very outset, journalism was pure. It was not ad revenue based. It was not let's sell it based. It's let's find the truth. Let's go on scene and let's report it. And then the more you become reliant on advertisers, on revenue. I mean, look what happened to Twitter. How many advertisers it lost when Elon stopped spinning the left politics and went basically the complete opposite direction. I mean, he went far right with it. And God bless him. Let him do whatever he wants. It's his platform. He wants to sink it. He wants to lift it. Whatever's going to happen, who knows? But the bottom line is, the timeline moves forward. Time continues on whether you like it or not. And so with journalism, especially, they've been bought, paid, and sold. I mean, how many articles have you individually, I'm talking to you, the viewer, the listener on the other end of this lens, how many times have you seen an article and it's like new, Pixel 7 is having all these features? Like, do you honestly think some journalist was sitting around and going, what would be really cool to write about? The seventh installment in a cell phone saga out of 100 cell phones that exist out there. Nobody cares. Nobody. Somebody paid for that article. Google or some other agency related to Google, Alpha, whatever it's called, the Alphabet, I think is what it's called. Alphabet may have paid for it. The ones who are kind of like Google is a subsidiary of or whatever, but I think Alphabet is kind of owned by Google. Regardless, it doesn't matter. The point is, all these articles that we're being fed, and now we're seeing it's not 1 out of 10, it's 99 out of 100, if not 100 out of 100, are all bought, paid for, sold to us as if they're being, as if it's news, as if it's worthy information, when in reality, somebody purchased it in order to feed it to us. So now we're consuming information and we say, I love meeting these people like, oh, I watch the news. I'm very informed. And I'm like, really? You're informed of exactly what they want you to be informed of. You're not really informed. Now, you're informed of something. You're probably more informed than me. I don't watch the news. I'll freely admit it. I've grown in a household where we didn't watch the news. I never watched the news. It's just I grew up on not reading any news. I'll occasionally scroll through and learn a thing or two here and there. But for the most part, I know, and I now it's even worse, by the way. Now it's even worse with my Pixel phone, which I have. Okay, I've been generation to generation. The last 7 phones have all been Pixel. I love the Google phones. That's just me. I like Android. I like Google. Okay, you know something about me now. I will say that the articles that I choose to click on are now being pushed to the front. So now here's what you have. Not only do you have selective journalism of articles that are bought, paid for, and sold to us, you now have an algorithm that picks up on which of these articles that are bought and paid and sold to us are now being shoved to the top, so you get more of what they know you already want. So you're not getting news at all. You're getting news that you want to get, that they want you to get. I mean, that is like a Pandora's box. You can't close back up. And that's just reality. And there's nothing that we can be like, okay, let's start a petition to like fix it. You can't. It's not possible. The only way that it could be like adjusted is the collective hive mind needs to begin to reject the information that is being put forth. And that is an impossibility because the collective hive mind is an organic, living, breathing organism that consists of the psyche, the conscious, and the subconscious of millions, if not billions, with a B, of individuals. And now we surpassed 8 billion people. Not all of us, of course, are being exposed to the same stuff. But the problem is, in order to be able to adjust and resist, we all have to have like the same wavelength. And the problem is because the influence comes from the top rather than from the bottom, it's kind of hard to do. Now, there is a tipping point. There is eventually a tipping point. That's how revolutions get started. And they don't just happen. You know, revolution doesn't just like, all right, we're going to have a revolution on Tuesday. Who's in? You know, like that's not how it happens. When there is enough sufficient pressure from the elite on the masses, and the masses begin to resist collectively because they're tired of being oppressed, they're tired of being misled, they're tired of being underfed, overtaxed, whatever it may be. Name your country, name your era. I'll tell you the reason for the revolution starting. You know what I mean? It's just a natural course of history, unfortunately. And right now we're in the midst of the era. We were just in the era of information, the information era, because the industrial era is kind of dead. We're now in the information era. And I think we passed the information era and we are in the misinformation and disinformation era. And who knows what's next? I mean, maybe they'll create some sort of AI that is going to be able to sift through. That is going to be a project worth billions of dollars. If you can have an AI that is going to sift through articles that are actually going to be able to discern, like, is this article paid for? Does it seem legitimate? I mean, that would be something unbelievable. I think it would be almost impossible to build. But hey, shout out to you, viewer, who's a computer engineer going, I'm on it, DUI guy. You know, so anyway, it's just reality. This is the bottom line. This is not something like, you know, we need to rise against. And, you know, somebody in the comment section was like, someone in the comment section was like, so Orwellian. Because George Orwell was ahead of his time. He was a visionary. He saw the signs. He knew where we were headed. He saw it before it happened. And the reality is, again, it's not anything bad. It's just fact. You know, people call me, I had at least one of my friends call me a nihilist because he's like, well, you know, we have global warming and we got to do something about it. And I'm like, or we can just watch it happen and be on the sidelines. You know, that's me. That's me. I'm a pacifist in that regard. I'm an activist when it comes to other things. So the bottom line, again, it's reality. There's nothing wrong with simply accepting it and watching it. You don't need to be like, you know, pounding your gavel every morning. We need to do something about it. Some people choose to do that. I'm not one of those people. So I think all of this really is going to continue on until the people have enough and something will change. And it will change because there's no amount of money that can overcome the collective hive mind. Once the collective hive mind basically independently we form an opinion, and it now becomes the norm, the moray of society, if you will, the morality of the time. Like, notice how morality actually changes over time. It is not one size fits all. There's ethics, which is universal, and morality, it kind of sometimes changes with the times. um,
Well, I
we
think
will see a time when it's going to shift, but it's got to be collective. It can't be individual, because individuals, you need a lot of money and power to be able to do that. Elon, sorry, just one final point, Claire. I know I've been babbling for a while. um, Elon Musk actually is one of those people that can influence from the other side and change the trajectory of the collective hive mind, because he's got a lot of money, he's got a lot of power, and he's got a lot of influence, especially with the purchase of Twitter. He is unstoppable. Like, he can literally shout from the rooftops. Every tweet, within a second, 1 million people have seen it. And then the next second, another 1 million people. So that's just one example.
Yeah, no, I wanted to get into the Google of it for a minute, because Larry Page, who was, one of the founders of Google, he is wanted by the U.S. Virgin Islands in connection with his association with Jeffrey Epstein, and he's basically gone AWOL. And the U.S. Virgin Islands is asked to go to Alphabet Inc., which is the parent company of Google. And the chair of Alphabet Inc. is this guy called John Hennessy, who was the president of Stanford University from 2000 till 2016. And he was working with Google while he was president of Stanford. And, an awful lot of this information, whether it's Me Too, whether it's Amber Heard, whether it's, disinformation, suppressing information, actually runs right through Stanford. And they have this, what is it, Stanford Information Laboratory or something like that. But they have, and when Elon Musk took over Twitter, he did sue, I think, and he wanted to get discovery about Stanford's correspondence with Twitter, and I'm not quite sure what happened about it. And Michelle Dauber comes into this because Michelle Dauber's husband, Ken Dauber, is a very early hire at Google. I think he was Google hire number 9. So he probably knows Larry Page. He probably knows Jeffrey Epstein too. And he in 2016 was, supposedly manipulating social media, particularly for the recall of Judge Persky in the wake of the Brock Turner trial. And Matt Taibbi and others have, spoken up about the Twitter files and the media manipulation, and they've talked about it in the last couple of years. But it goes back much further, and I do think that the public is owed an explanation about what was going on with Google and what was going on with Google and Epstein. And Google has these contracts with New York Times, with CBS, with NBC, with all of these places for pushing headlines to the top of your search thing. Right. So if you look up, I haven't done it, but if you look up Amber Heard, I'm sure all the headlines that are being are basically promoting her as a victim as opposed to a liar. And
there weren't very many articles written about painting her as a liar. There was more the independent journalism, like I said, including the law tubers and all that. But listen, I think my audience has gotten it, and we could go on and on for another hour or two, but I wanna thank you for coming, Claire. It's always a pleasure with you, honestly.
Thank you, and sorry, this kind of went into various different avenues, but I hope that everybody who's watching this will just start reading articles differently and thinking about them as influencers, not journalists.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Claire.
We'll
see you next time.
You. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that was Claire Best, you guys. Always a pleasure. I wanted to Thank you all for coming and watching. I hope you learned something. I mean, I tried to keep it on topic as much as I can. Sometimes we go on tangents, as you know, as I went on my rant, but I will see you all next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.